This episode of FilmRiot is brought to you by Domain.com. Today on FilmRiot, we're jumping back into Element 3D and putting 3D objects into our scene. Welcome to FilmRiot, the show that takes the mystery out of the effects and techniques. We're going to some of your favorite Hollywood films. I'm your host, Ryan Conley, and today we're following up with the stuff that we did last week with the stuff that we did last week. What? So last week we did a bunch of 3D object goodness in our scene and reviewed the plugin which we used to do that. This one, Element 3D from videocopilot.net. So today we're going to go back and show you how we fit these objects and others in to the scene. And a one, and a two, and a you.
Hey, remember that time I said you? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
So you silly hoe.
Hey ho!
Yikes. That was amazing.
Nice joke, bro!
And back on track. First thing first, you gotta shoot your footage. Now you're gonna wanna keep a few things in mind here. One, have a moving shot. If you want a static shot, that's fine, but it's not gonna be very dynamic or show off the 3D very much at all, like this versus this. Next is the type of moving shot you use. You can have a dolly or any other kind of smooth shot, but I personally think that the handheld feel lends itself to a much more convincing and impressive shot, as long as you can get a good track, of course, which, speaking of, you have to make sure you can track your footage. Way to cut my line off, Eris! Whoa! If you're shooting a white wall, you're not going to be able to get a smooth track from that because there are no points to track. You need detail and contrast for your program to do its work. And another thing is reference. For this building shot, the chair back here was a good enough reference to see how the building should sit in the place that I want it to in fact sit. Now we shoot, keeping in mind what we are placing in our scene and where. For that, and for the track, I place these objects I found lying around to make some contrast on the ground where I wanted to place the building.
Here's my nail polish. I've been looking for this everywhere.
So now we go inside After Effects and it's time to track my footage, which I will do using Adobe's very impressive camera tracker. So I will bring my footage into the comp, right click and click Track Camera. And After Effects goes to work figuring out my scene. And since we have to wait a second for this to finish, look at this. So now our track is finished and we get all these lovely little colorful track points. As you can see here, the tracker has found my points on the floor. So now I will roll over until I have a good selection from the targets on the floor, and then I will right click and hit Create Null and Camera. And now you see that I have a camera and a null with the null tracking nicely to our scene. Next I'll create a solid, add element, then jump into select the model I want, which of course is the Empire State Building from the Metropolitan Pack. And here it is, looking like it's floating in the middle of the room, nowhere near where I want it to be. So, what do we do?
Discouraged? Disgruntled? Heck no.
Last week, I explained that my only complaint was that there was no real way to attach the model to a null and be able to see it in 3D space from other views. Well, as it turns out, there is. First, Harry Frank shot me over a preset that he made called Element 3D Null Tracker, which attaches the model to the null you select, and you can find that right here. But even better than that is the coming 1.5.6 update, which has the ability to create a null for each individual group, and that's built in.
What are you new? What are you new? What are you new?
So now you can create a null for each object that you have and control it 10 times easier by using nulls, which really makes life a lot easier when you're moving stuff around. Now to do this, just go to the group you want to create a null for, then group utilities and create null. This will create a null that will attach to that group, which I will rename and then can use to move my object around. And since I have made this null down here, which is right where I want the building to be, I will hold shift and pick whip my element null layer to the floor null, and it will jump right to that location. Now I use the null controls to position my building correctly and can even scale it using the null controls, which makes it like 10,000 times easier. Seriously, using nulls just makes this process so much, it's like butter smooth. I f***ing love this. But here we have it so far, the building locked to our environment, looking lovely. Now we're gonna take a quick break and we'll get back into this and how we made the building actually look like it fits within the scene and belongingness there, belongingness there, belong.
And we go on, we are. Now we're rocking with I Am and Britney. And scream and shout and let it all out. And we go on, we are. Will I Am rocking with Will I Am and Britney.
So if you're starting a nonprofit organization to stop people from kicking bunnies, now I know what you're saying, Ryan, people kick bunnies? Yes, it's an epidemic and it needs to be stopped. So if you're creating that website to stop this horrible epidemic of fluffy kickery, then first of all, I commend you, that's beautiful and you're a wonderful person. But secondly, you should hook yourself up and get this thing up and going by using domain.com to get your hosting and your domain name, like stopkickingthefluffies.com. For instance, could be the domain name. The domain discovery system is gonna help you pick the best one. Bet you $1,000 that's the one that it tells you to pick because that's a solid name. So to get your awesomely charitable Stop Kicking the Fluffy Bunnies website up and going, use domain.com and the coupon code FilmRiot to save yourself 15% off because this is a non-profit. You gotta save money where you can, you know what I mean? So go to domain.com and let's stop the bunny kicking.
Logo.
So we got that 3D loving from the oven in the scene and it's all tracked and nice, but it still doesn't look like it actually belongs there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is color correct my element layer to match the scene. And then as we move through here, you can see that there's a natural flare that pops up as I get closer to the window. This of course brightens the scene a bit, so I'm going to keyframe my levels to match the light change in the room. Next, I'm gonna add a fast blur and set it to around 1. This is of course gonna depend on the size of your object. Now, why am I doing this? Well, if we zoom in here, you can see that DSLRs are not fully sharp. So once I add this blur, it makes my very sharp image a little blurred and it matches the background, which is also a little bit blurred.
What?
Next, I'm gonna go into element panels and use the light preset. I found for my scene that 360 works pretty good. Now you're not always gonna use this. Sometimes you're gonna use just comp lights. Sometimes you're gonna use different ones. For me, the 360 was actually pretty solid. Then I'm gonna flip on ambient occlusion and adjust it to the look I want. Next, I'm gonna create a solid, turn it to 3D, shift, pick, whip to the floor knoll, adjust the rotation, mask, feather, and switch to soft light, then drop the opacity just a bit, and bazamby jammy, I got a shadow on the floor. Now there's a bunch of different methods that you can use to create a shadow for an element layer, but in this scene, I found that this method worked best for me. And now my building is starting to look like it belongs there.
Perverted.
But I have 3 more steps. So first I'm gonna create a light and position it to be a rim light for my building, and to make sure that my light stays focused on my building as I move it around, I'm gonna alt-click the point of interest on the light, then I'm gonna pick whip that to the position of the element null. So now, wherever I move this light, it's gonna keep facing the building. So now I move it until it hits the side of the building here and jack up the intensity. And for my final step, I'm gonna add some lens flares and I'm gonna put them in 3D space. One is gonna be a warmer up here to the left and the other one, a cooler one, coming from the door. This is gonna help mask the building in a bit, again, and make it feel a little more organic to the actual environment. Now the last thing that we're gonna do is add your color correction and bars if you want them, and we have. So there you go, adding a 3D object into your scene using Element 3D, which I have to say, I freaking love this. I love it. It's a whole new world opening up for VFX artists who don't have heavy knowledge in 3D software like myself, and a new and faster workflow opened up for 3D artists. It's just nuts. So again, you can get this plugin from Video Copilot right here, but the 1.5.6 update is not out just yet. Andrew tells me it's coming out very soon, maybe even Monday, so keep a lookout for that. And get your 3D on. Want to see something random?
Acrobatic star.
Now I know we passed over one of the most important parts, which is tracking, but next week I'm gonna be going into tracking your footage, and I'm gonna be testing out actually a few different ways and programs that you can do that. It's gonna be fun, had by all. But that is it for today. As always, you can do the Twitter thing-a-dang, follow action here. And speaking of Twitter, our Triune Apparel Twitter is actually up and we're posting all sorts of goodies. If you follow us on that Twitter, you'll see that we're posting deals and giveaways as well. The other day we posted a deal of 50% off. That's a lot of percent. off. That's like circumcision of money.
Perfect.
So if you're wanting something from our try-in store, you should definitely follow us on there for some discount action. But that is it, my film riders. I'll see you next week when I whine a lot and get my hand chopped off.
And we scream and shout and let it all out. And we will scream and shout and let it all out. And we go, ah, we are, we are, we are. And we go, ah, we are, we are, we are. It's Will I Am and Brittany.